Hey, welcome to Church Online. I'm so glad that you're able to join us as we just take some time out from the regular schedule as we just reflect on the halfway point of the series we're in, My Heart, His Home. You know, whether you are watching from here in Wellington or elsewhere in the world, it's so good just to be able to have this time together to take stock, because it's so easy to get into the habit of listening to a sermon and thinking, oh, wow, yeah, that's good. And we sense the Holy Spirit speaking to us. And then the next week comes and we get the next installment. And before we know it, we've lost track. So I just wanted to bring these guys in and just to have a bit of a conversation. You're familiar with this illustrious gentleman on my right.
He'll get there.
Lewis. How could I forget Lewis? Lewis, and of course Hannah on my left. You've seen them online. Normally Hannah is behind the scenes doing all the tech stuff. She's the one who keeps me on track. Lewis is the one who's made my hair go grey. But we have fun. And I just thought it'd be so good just to spend some time, this midpoint, as I say, in the series, and just think about what we've covered and how we're going and what can we do, because I really believe that Jesus wants to make his heart in our homes. His home in our hearts, I should say. I really believe that he has much more for us, so much more. In fact, next week we're going to be talking about this when we talk about hope, and I just wanted to spend some time preparing our hearts for that. So you guys, how have you found it so far?
Personally, I think it's definitely one of the top series that you've done.
Thank you.
And I've been here for a lot of his series, so I'm not just saying that, but it has definitely been one of my favorite because it's been challenging, but challenging in a good way. It's definitely a message that not just me, but I'm sure many other people need to hear at this time, because there's so much going on at the moment in the world and in our own worlds that we get caught up in, the things, and we don't really take time to just reflect on what are we taking into our hearts and what are we allowing in. So it definitely has been challenging, but in a really good way.
So what's one of the biggest challenges for you personally?
For me personally, one of the biggest challenges is just sort of differentiating what I am allowing into my heart and what I need to be not allowing in, which is why I think you briefly spoke about this in the very first week of the series. And so that's been something that's really stuck by me. And every time I do go through a challenge, whether it's in my personal life or whether it's my friend circle or whatever it is, it's a question I keep asking myself: is this something I should be allowing to take control of my heart, or is it something that I need to allow God to take control of?
That's so encouraging. What about you, Lewis? How are you finding it?
I just feel this whole series is very relatable for what everyone's going through in this time. And, with anyone's walk in Christ, just started or been going for 70 years, or whatever, that's a joke, whatever it may be, it's really relatable for us in our walk of just, making our heart his home and putting things in place. I think every week, from passion to honour to submission, and I know there was the first one as well, which was
guarding our heart.
Guarding your heart. Yeah. All of it together. It just helps us to not just be theory, but practically every day. And I just remember going through every day and having issues and challenges, and just being reminded of some key points that I think we all need. And I think that's been a real strong part of it for me.
Well, on that basis, let me give you a quick pop quiz. You might want to join us at home. Okay, it's complete these things. It is time to stop living down.
Down.
I don't remember this one.
Wow, I'm sure all of you watching got it. It's time to stop living down to the world and start living up to God.
I
was going to say that.
Just testing everyone.
And as royalty, we live for the good of
the kingdom,
others,
and
God.
The glory of God.
I did remember that one.
You can tell who's not guarding their heart as well as they need to.
It's bad because by Sunday I've seen the sermon about 8 times. So I should really know this, so I'm sorry. But
the thing is that this is why we're doing this series, because I really do believe that for all of us, we need to stop living the way everybody else lives. To be a Christian is not to live like everybody else, but to have an eternal hope. To be a Christian is to live as Christ. And that means we can't live down to the world. And it means we don't live for ourselves. We live up to God and we live for the good of others, because that's what brings Him glory. And that's why we did that series. We began the series with guarding our heart, because it does flow. Everything in our life flows from it. And I don't know how, have you been able to make connections between issues in your life downstream, and when you've tracked it back, you think that's because it's something in my heart that I wasn't aware of?
Definitely. I think when I do recognize that is I look back and I see that I've always tried to sort of figure it out, but it's not until I completely surrender it to God where I'm like, okay, no, there's actually an underlying issue that I never dealt with, because I was so sort of, I can do this on my own mentality. So I was like, no, there's nothing, like you just cover it up. And then finally when you reach breaking point, you realize that all along there has been issues that you're not dealing with on the inside. So that when you get to that point is when, you let go and you give it to God, and that's when you start to, more things are revealed to you.
Yeah.
So
I think even in this culture now, we live in this aspect of how you live, who you are is who you are. Your faults, that's just who you are. But I think that's not true when we read the Bible. And you're right, there's underlining things that, that you just notice, no, this isn't actually who I am. I don't want this to be who I am. This is actually not who God's called me to be. And so often we just live in default, that's who I am, rather than going to the root and figuring out actually what is going on. Why am I responding like this? And
it's so true. It's so true.
Going back to the root of the course.
It's so true. And if you are watching and thinking, what are they talking about? You can find the first 4 sermons in this series, My Heart, His Home, on YouTube or on Facebook, and that'll help set the context for you. What we've been talking about is how to make our heart, a home for Christ, because the biggest problem I think many of us have, and why we don't experience the fullness of life that Jesus said, is we don't live as children of God. We live as citizens of the kingdom of heaven. Yeah. And I talked about how, in the first one, I think, about how Prince Charles is the heir to the throne, but he's also a citizen of the British Isles of England. But when he goes about his daily living, he's not going about it as a citizen, he's going about it as heir to the throne. Yeah. And we need to live as heirs to the throne. Our Father is the King of the kingdom. Yeah. And so we're citizens, but we're more than that. We are royalty. Yeah. And we've got to start living out of that. We've got to start living a life worthy of our station. And that's why I like what you said about not living to our default settings. Yeah. Our default settings. And then, of course, we also talked about passion. And I don't know where those of you who are watching us, how you find passion. If you, I wondered, I'd love to see what you say in the comments about that message about we've got to be passionate. We've got to be more passionate for God than anything else. Otherwise, we've made for ourselves an idol in life. And what did that stir in you when we talked about passion and the need for passion and what it unlocks in our life?
Well, I think for me, a lot of different things. I loved the picture as, I can't remember exactly which Bible story, about striking the ground 3 times. The king, Elisha, strike the ground 3 times. I love the picture you showed of just keep on going rather than just doing the minimum. And for us, it's, I don't know, for a lot of us and for myself, I so often look at what needs to be done. I look at time frames, I look at different things, and that usually outweighs my decision making rather than the passion of who Jesus is, who He is in my life.
That's so good.
And so to stop and go, actually, He's in everything with us. He's with us in everything. So those little details, we'll get that covered. But what needs to be the focus is the passion we have for Him. Yeah. And that needs to overthrow everything else. Yeah. And I just love that picture of pray for my friends. But no, just keep going, keep going.
I think for me, what really, and it's still with me, is the graphic that you showed us, and you related it back to sort of when a couple first gets married and they have the honeymoon stage, and then they go into the sort of the normal phase, and then just as about as about your breakthrough is going to come, that's when we tend to sort of get tired and we start to sort of wear out. And I think I find myself in that sort of middle phase a lot of the time. And what's helped me sort of move on from it is knowing that, okay, no, in order for me to get through the fact that I can first of all recognize that I'm in this phase is showing growth in my relationship with God. But each time to get back up and say, no, I'm closer to my breakthrough, it's important to sort of, like we've been saying, is to stir up that passion and keep going, like Lewis was saying, is keep knocking and keep asking God for those sort of answers from him, for his voice, and that's what's going to help us get to that other side, to our breakthrough. And so whenever recently I found myself in that phase, I've just kept picturing mentally that graphic that you've shown us, and it keeps showing me that, okay, no, my breakthrough is actually almost here. I just need to keep knocking and keep talking to God. So.
Because I think it's important for us to remember there is a difference between excitement and passion. Excitement is an emotional thing. It's I really enjoy this.
Yeah.
But passion is a state of being. It's I can't imagine being anywhere else. I can't imagine doing anything else. I can't imagine being with anyone else, because it involves everything in us. And passion allows us to do hard yards. Excitement, I give up.
Yeah.
But yesterday I celebrated 33 years of marriage, and I can say I'm probably more passionate about my wife and about marriage than I was 33 years ago. Because 33 years ago I was in love. There was no question of that. But I was in love with this person. And I had these dreams and these ideas of what it would look like. But as we've gone on and done life together, it's moved from excitement, because sometimes there is no excitement getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to feed kids. There's no excitement, just having to roll your eyes as one of your children for the umpteenth time that day has done something wrong. But passion, on the other hand, is about, I'm going to do this because I can see the end result. I'm going to invest myself in this because it's not about how I feel, but it's about what I can imagine the result being. And I think we have to learn to live out of that more than we do. It is easier said than done. Which begs a question for you guys at home. How passionate are you? If you were to draw a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being, I can't even be bothered getting out of bed in the morning in terms of my faith, versus 10, Jesus, you just give the word, I'm just hungry for what you've got. Where would you put yourself? Where would you put yourself? Same with you guys. Think about it. Where would we put ourselves on that continuum? And then ask yourself, so what do I need to do to take another step? Yeah. Because if we don't ask ourselves, what do I need to do, we're never going to do it. And I do not want to see anybody settle for second best. Yeah. I want you guys at home and you guys to experience the fullness of what God has for you, because his plans are good, his plans are perfect, and he says, I can do far more than you can imagine or conceive. And passion is what connects us with that in many ways. Yeah. How did you guys find the honour, the sermon on honour?
Was it challenging?
Yeah, I do love that whole conversation on honour and creating a culture of honour, because it's so counterculture. As people only deserve for us to be nice to them and be good to them. They've got to prove themselves. But to create a culture of honour where we're constantly, building other people up. I love the story about David had this opportunity to take out someone who was trying to kill him. This great opportunity, but still, he honoured God so much, and he honoured Saul because this is God's anointed one, that he didn't. He cut the robe, but he felt guilty about that. To not even do anything. And I think for us, we live in this idea that people have to earn us to do it, to be nice to them. But to live out of this place of creating a culture of honour, honouring people wherever they may be in our lives, and first honouring God with our life is such counterculture, but it's such an incredible thing that we can walk in, which will actually bring more joy and anything into our lives rather than anything else. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think for me, something that, has stuck with me from that sermon was when you spoke about honoring our governmental authorities and political leaders and such. And I think that's something that I do need to keep constantly reminding myself, is I can personally get stuck in my own opinions and the opinions I hear from other people, where I need to constantly remind myself that, no, God's placed that person there for a reason, and I need to honor the fact that God's placed them there. And no matter how they look to my worldly eyes, no matter how they seem to people around me, at the end of the day, God's chosen that person to be there, and I need to respect and honor that. And I've heard you say this many times, where we've already read the end of the book. We know how it's going to end. So really, that shouldn't be something that we sort of choose to disrespect or choose not to give, to honor that authority for people in that role, because we already know what's going to happen. We already have that promise of God. So we just need to trust and trust that God placed that person and He knows what He's doing. So we need to respect those people and honor them with that respect.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And I think that this is one of the things that I think many of us struggle with, isn't it? I'm sure that you at home, you struggle with this probably more than some of the other things that we have and may be talking about in the future. Judging by the questions on Q&A, there's been so many about how can you submit, how can you honour a government that is so anti-God? How can you honour people who are abusive? How can you honour this and honour that? And I always come back to that fact that we're honouring the image of God in one another. If you can't honour the image of God in one another, then you're not honouring God.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, and if this is your struggle to honour authorities over you, whether that be a teacher, whether it be a parent, whether it be a local government authority, whether it be a central government authority, the captain of your sports team or whatever, then what you're really saying is, God, I could have done a better job than you did with that person. That's really what we're saying. Because we've got to learn to separate out people from politics, people from philosophy, people from their behaviour. I have this saying, in fact, you came to Bible college the year after I retired.
Yes, I wasn't there.
14 years lecturing the same paper. It was good to finish. But one of the things I taught was pastoral theology, ethics, and I used to have this mantra that anger is an invitation for intimacy by people who don't know how to ask for it.
That's good.
You've got to separate behaviour out from people. People are angry, people lash out, people respond aggressively at times because they want to be validated and they don't know how. And we learn these patterns early on from childhood that if I do this, then my mother will come and comfort me. So it just transfers as an adult. We lash out and people will, we think people are going to acknowledge us. And it's just an invitation for intimacy. And I think if we can remember that, then we're going to honour the person because we separate out their politics, their behaviour from them. I was thinking about this as you were speaking before about, we've got a young woman in church who, I just have great joy every time I look at her, and I pray for her, and I know so many people would not see her the way that God sees her, and sadly she's bought into the lie of the enemy, who's spoken to her, shouted at times from people close to her, whispered to her at times from friends, and she's bought into this lie that she's less than she is, and yet she's got such an incredible heart and such an incredible spirit that has been crushed in some ways because people haven't been able to separate out or to recognise the image of God in her and separate her from her attitude, from her behaviours and all that. And I just think if we've got to do better. Maybe you've got people in your workplace. You've got to see the image of God in them, because if you honour them, God's going to honour you. You see, the same measure you use is the measure used for us. So if you want people to honour you, if you want God to honour you at home, you need to start honouring one another. You need to start doing it. So, yeah. So I encourage you to think about it. Where do you struggle to honour? And recognise it probably says more about issues in your life. Again, guard your heart. You see, if you've got dishonour coming into your life, it's going to flow downstream into your perspective about other people, and you just need to learn to deal with it. Yeah. And last week was sort of built on that, where we talked about submission. Yes, there were so many scriptures I wanted to quote, but I restrained myself. What were your thoughts on that? What was your takeaway from that one, Lewis?
Well, with this whole submission thing, like everything I think we talk about is going against culture. I think it's a standard culture. Everything, this my heart, his story. This whole idea is going, okay, this is how the world is going, but no, this isn't how God's going.
Yeah.
And for submission, I think there's this really key aspect of it. These two words, trust and control, in the sense of that we try, in not submitting to leaders of authority, leaders put in our place, in relationships and different things like that. In not submitting, we've got this trust issue and control. I know better. Yeah. I know better than the person God put in charge of me. Really? If God put that person in front of us, there's a reason. And submission, as I think you mentioned, is the best place for us to grow. I think that's one of the key points, is this is where we're going to grow. This is where we're going to learn. To be honest, I don't know about you, but I don't know everything. And I'm in the place in my whatever adulthood I'm in now, in my late 20s, where I know there's so much more to learn, but I'm not going to learn anything if I think I'm above everyone else and think I know it. It's through submission. That's where there's going to be the greatest growth for me as a person.
Yeah. In fact, on that note, you say about learning, you only learn if you submit. I have this thing that I think that it's really dangerous for us to try and be the smartest person in the room all the time. Because if we seek to be the smartest person in the room, then we're not growing, we're not learning, because we're putting ourselves at the top. And I actively seek to be amongst people who are smarter than me regularly, because then I can learn from them. And learning from them, you grow from them. And so I encourage you all to make sure that you're not the smartest person in the room. Be in environments where there are people who are smarter than you, wiser than you, more experienced than you, who can give perspective and help you learn so that you can grow, because it's going to expose things in your life, in your heart and your thinking that can save you so much if you deal with it earlier on in the journey than later.
I think one of the fourth point that you said, and I don't exactly remember the right words, but it was something along of submission determines your destiny.
Yeah.
Yes. Or something.
It releases your destiny.
Releases, yes.
Brings you into your destiny.
And it's funny because Lewis mentioned the word control, which I was going to talk about that, because I like it when I have control over things that are happening in my life, when I know what's happening, when I can have control over what to do and what not to do. But I think that's also one of the biggest things I need to let go of so I can submit to God. Because when I'm not submitting to God, my destiny is not going to be released, and that means I'm not walking in the calling that God has over my life. And I can't expect for God to work in me and move in me if I'm not willing to let go of something like control and walk in the calling He has over my life. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
But yeah, so I think that definitely was very challenging for me, is because it's sounded so simple when you were speaking it, but then in my head I'm like, whoa, like that's exactly what I need to go home and do today. Is I need to sit down and have a conversation with God and say, I'm sorry for trying to do this on my own, but in order to feel like I'm walking in my full purpose that you've given me, I need to start submitting to you more often.
But as you mentioned that, as I said it as well, is I think that is a big part of this, I don't know if it's intentional, of the series, is going against control.
Yeah.
For a lot of us, we love Jesus and we love who He is in our life and everything God has done for us. We can look back at moments and go, there's God.
Yeah.
But the hardest part is, this whole series, my heart, but it's not my story, it's His story. Releasing that control to God. Releasing that control. And I know for a lot of us now, we need to get to that place of just going, okay, I need it. Like for me, I know a big part of mine is, and I said it before, I always look at what needs to be done. That's my control.
Yeah.
I need to just go, no, whatever you're doing, God, I trust you, I'm walking with you. And the verse you mentioned it is a big part of this. Is I go through Luke 9:23-24. For whoever wants to follow me must deny themselves, pick up that cross daily, and follow me. And I think that's a big part of it. Denying ourselves, denying that control, and following wherever he says go.
Yeah.
Yep, no, I agree, and as I said in that message, and maybe you fit into this category. Watching, you struggle to be submitted to authorities and let go because they're not God-honouring, they are ungodly, they make bad decisions, they're tyrants in the workplace, they're abusive, but you've got to remember that God's going to hold them responsible for how they lead. He's going to hold you and I responsible for how we follow. And the only way to follow is to pick up your cross. And if you didn't catch last week, I really encourage you to go back and have a look at that. I made drew the example. Well, not literally drew, but I drew the analogy, I guess, of with Luke, where Jesus says, "Pick up your crosses." I think the cross that we have to pick up is where our will and the will of God intersect. It's a constant, Lord. What would you? What's your way? What would you do? What's the right thing to do? What's the biblical thing? What's the Jesus thing? And I find myself asking that continually because there are so often times where I just default. I know how to do this, and I've got to tell you guys that after a long time of ministry and a long time of life, that's when you're most vulnerable to coming unstuck. Is when you think, I know how to do this. I think of Moses. He was told to hit the rock and water would come out. He did. And the next time they were thirsty, he just thought, I know how to do this. And he hit the rock, and yet God said, speak to it. And of course that cost him the promised land. And that's why submission brings you into your destiny. If Moses had submitted his will and his understanding and his experience to God, who said, second time round, don't strike the rock, speak to it, he would have entered the promised land. He saw it, but he was denied it. And maybe you're in that place right now where there's promises that you feel God's made, or you look at your life and you think, why am I not experiencing the peace? Why do I look at my life compared to others and theirs is so much better? And maybe it's because God is wanting to teach you some things, some character things. But if you submit, it'll bring you into your destiny. It's so crucial to it. So yeah. So, and what other takeaways have you guys had from this series so far? For me, as a seasoned campaigner, walking with Jesus for 34 years now, and having time to look back over life, there's so much I've learned. Where are you guys at? What are you learning?
Well, I think this series has really emphasised this whole idea of, we look at this whole thing. We so often just focus on the short term and just in the moment and how things look at the second. But through going through all of this and submission, honour, guarding your heart, you don't see just the short term focus. It's a long term focus. Life isn't just about the short term, and for how we live, it's all about the big picture, not just how this is going to affect me. Future Lewis will deal with this, but what's the long-term consequences of how I live my life? And I think that's such a massive example. I just, on and off topic, I did see a video which was really interesting of this family who were in $1 million of debt, just because they lived in the moment and they had, I think, $150,000 of credit card debt. And so it shows that it wasn't just because they just spent what they didn't have. It was about the moment. And I think for us, guarding our hearts, my heart, his story is going, okay, at this moment things might be a bit weird, not how I like it, but I'm going to still live passionately and seek to be more passionate about my life, and I'm going to walk honourably to people, submit to those God's put in my life. For what is happening now isn't how things are always going to be. They're going to be different. I want God to continue to grow me, stretch me, and use me for the long term, not just for how I feel in this moment.
Yeah, and I think something I remember is in the first week of the series, you said that things like our social media need us to have God in our hearts. Our workplaces need God. People need God. Yeah, our hearts need God, and our families and things like that. And that really spoke to me, because I think a lot of the time when we think of our hearts and God, we think it's a personal thing, which it is. But it's not just that. It's not just between us and God. We need to purify our hearts and guard our hearts for those around us, so that we are representing and being Christ-like for those that don't know him yet. And so I think it's a constant reminder for me, for when I am doing things on social media and uploading, is this something God would want me to post? When I'm speaking to those around me, is this something God would want me to say? Is what's coming out of my mouth something that God would place in my heart to begin with? So I think it's very important, because as much as it is cleaning our own hearts and purifying our own hearts, we're doing that not only for ourselves, but for those whose life we speak into, for those who we encourage and pray for. We need our hearts to be purified by God for those reasons. So I think that's something that I will constantly, like Lewis said, it's long term, that we need to be constantly reminding ourselves of those things, not just an in the moment, God come and purify my heart. No, it's a thing that we need to be doing long term.
So good.
Yeah.
That's so good. You can see why I enjoy my job with people like this, who wouldn't want to be me, and it's not just these two. There's lots of Lewis's and Hannah's in ALC, that God is just moving in their lives and laying foundations, and as one who's sort of, still got a bit of life in front of them yet, but is looking to the next generation. I am so excited for what God is going to do. If Jesus should not return in my lifetime, I have every confidence in the church when I look at these guys, when I hear your stories, and I see what God is doing in your life, and I hear how God is honing his grace and perfecting faith in you. I am so excited. So I hope this has been encouraging for you. The reason, as I say, we did this sort of mid-sermon series sort of break is just to reflect, so that we don't just go from week to week to week and not really put it into practice. I think it's important that we hear the word, hear what the Spirit is saying to us, and let him do that, and we put it into practice so that we become everything he wants us to be. Because I really genuinely believe that wherever you are, God has placed you there for a reason. I believe that you have a future. I believe that you are God's person in your workplace, in your family, in your community, and that God wants to break out in your situations through you. He loves you, he cares for you, but he has positioned you not just for your sake, but for the sake of others. And I am so excited for this generation when I think about what God will do through you and through others. So next week we will be picking up the series again, and we are talking about hope. Because hope doesn't disappoint. Of all of them in the series, this is probably going to be my favourite one. It's the one that I am most excited about, because it helps us recognise that when we live out of hope, we are looking forward. We're not living in the moment. We're not looking back. We are looking forward, and we are getting perspective. So stay tuned. I hope you can join us next week for that instalment on the series My Heart, His Home, as we let God do what he wants to do in our life. Look forward to catching up with you. If you've got comments or questions, feel free to post them in the comments section below. Until next time, God bless.